Hey, it's been so good to be with you. Thanks for having me out here. Thanks for everyone who's hosted this, and the volunteers who've been amazing, the blue T-shirts, what a group of people. And, you know, the band who've had to learn all these new songs and worked so well. Thank you, guys. And isn't it amazing to have Jad with us? Such a credible bear of a man who's inspiring. So it's so good to hang out. In 1982, Van Halen were on a world tour. Any Van Halen fans? Yeah? A few of you look like Van Halen fans. And 1982, they're on a world tour, and they put in their rider that in their dressing room, they wanted to have bowls of M&Ms, but with all the brown M&Ms taken out. And if they found a brown M&M in that dressing room, heads would roll. And it kind of began this craze amongst bands and artists to see who could put the most crazy and wild thing in their rider. It became a thing of status. The more impressive, the bigger the band, the more demanding their rider became. So, Kanye West, he insists that anyone who works closely with him, a driver, an assistant, they can only wear clothes with 100% cotton. No one is allowed anywhere near him with a man-made fiber on him, lest they pollute Kanye West. Mary J. Blige, she insists that in any dressing room that she uses, that there needs to be a brand new toilet seat placed on the toilet, so that her buttocks are the only buttocks to touch that toilet seat. Mariah Carey. She insists, this is an event in London, that she asked for 100 doves and 20 white fluffy kittens. It was actually very similar to Jad's rider for this weekend. And these organisers in London, they wrote this reply to her saying, you know, we've managed to source the doves, we're going to release them into the sky for you, but we found trying to find 20 fluffy white kittens terribly difficult. And she was obviously furious. Adele, I mean, any Adele fans out there at the moment? Well, all that she wants in her rider, in her dressing room before she performs, is a beer and a sandwich. A classy British girl right there. And then Coldplay, they ask that they have in their dressing room postcards with stamps on so they can write love messages to their family and send them off from wherever they are in the world. Isn't that a beautiful thing? See, we are fascinated by success. We're so intrigued by successful people, leaders, bands, artists, businesses, churches. And for all of us, if we're really honest, if we're kind of really honest with ourselves, we want to look successful. We want to look impressive. We want to stand out. You know, we're kind of reading all these books about how we can be more effective, more influential, more impressive as people. And when things go wrong and when we look slightly foolish, we hate it. I remember a number of years ago, I just finished leading worship, and I came down and I was talking, and this lady came up to me and, with a few friends, and she said, "Oh, Tim, what was the fourth song you sung this morning?" And I began to wrap my brains, and it's like, "Was it How Great Is Our God?" She goes, No, I love that song. I said, "Oh, was it 10,000 Reasons?" She's like, No, we do that a lot at our church. I really love that one as well. And I suddenly thought, I think she means Here I Am to Worship, my song. I thought, oh, bless, she's probably going to tell me how much this song has impacted her life. You know, she'd probably get a little bit emotional, how it's kind of really walked with her through some really tough times. And I was getting ready to have my ego massaged, and I just put on that fake humility thing, which, if you're a worship leader, you've got to learn how to do this one. And I just said, it wasn't by any chance a song called Here I Am to Worship. And I actually began to gently sing the chorus, you know, just recreate the moment for her. Here I am to worship, here I am to bow down. She said, honestly true, quick as a flash, she said, "Oh no, I hate that song." She said, "Whenever I hear that song, I want to vomit." And like my friends are like rolling along the floor laughing. I'm going bright red. I'm pretending, you know, it's a Hillsong song and I hate it as well. And It was just an awful moment. There I was, wanting to look like a success, getting ready for all the praise, and I was slammed. I want to look tonight very briefly before we finish and spend some more time worshiping at a man in the Bible who had a big picture, a deeper understanding of what success was really about. In the eyes of the world, he achieved so much, yet what he was living for was so much deeper than just the praises and adoration of human beings around him. If you have a Bible, turn with me to Exodus 33. Exodus 33 is the story of Moses. And it's this amazing moment where Moses is having this conversation with God. Exodus 33, verse 12. Moses said to the Lord, "You've been telling me, lead these people, but you have not let me know whom you will send with me. You've said, I know you by name, and you have found favor with me. If you are pleased with me, teach me your ways, so I may know you and continue to find favor with you. Remember that this nation is your people." The Lord said, "My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest." Then Moses said to him, "If your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with me and with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish me and your people from all the other people on the face of the earth?" Just to set the scene, Moses has led the people of Israel out of slavery, out of captivity, out of Egypt, into freedom. God has miraculously parted the Red Sea. As a nation, they've walked through dry land to get towards a free place, and they're on a journey towards the promised land. They're waiting for this land flowing with milk and honey. Just to make it relevant to you guys, a land flowing with maple syrup and donuts. I don't know what I can... Bacon, of course, bacon is obvious. Maple syrup and bacon. They're waiting to get to this land that God has promised them. And they're on this journey wandering through the desert. And whenever there's a need, God has miraculously provided. You know, they're hungry, so God provides manna, bread, and quail, meat. They're thirsty, and Moses strikes a rock and water gushes forth. Everything that they needed, God has provided. Even more amazing, God sends his presence to lead them. A pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Can you imagine the people are camping out, and there always is either the cloud by day or the fire by night. The sense of God is with us. We are his people. He is our God. And when the cloud began to move off, the people would pack up their stuff and they'd start following it. Wherever the cloud or the fire went, the people would go. Such a clear sense of God being with them, dwelling right amongst them, in their midst, in the camp. And then Moses is taken up to Mount Sinai, 40 days, 40 nights, and he has this amazing kind of revelation encounter with God, where God begins to speak to him, and God gives him the 10 Commandments. It's a pretty cool thing. You know, sometimes we think about the 10 Commandments, you know, this list of do's and don'ts. But actually, for the people of Israel at this time, it's this amazing sense of a covenant. God saying, look, you are my people, I am your God, and here is a guidebook. Here is the way I want you to live. If you follow this, you will experience a fullness and a quality of life. You will know my pleasure. You will know my presence. This is the best way that you can live. So Moses is these tablets of stone with the 10 Commandments inscribed on them. And I can imagine him kind of walking back down the mountain, sort of whistling as he goes. Just wait till the people of Israel, my people, see what God has done. And as he's getting closer to the camp, he begins to hear music and singing and people celebrating. And he's like, ooh, they're getting excited. They got a sense something good is coming. And as he gets closer, he begins to notice that this shiny thing that they're all seeming to circulate around. And he realized that they have made for themselves an idol, a golden calf. They've taken off all their jewelry, they've melted it down, and they've built an idol. After all that God had done, all that he'd provided for them, so quickly they were willing to turn their back on him and create their own idol, copying all the other nations of the world, having something that was immediate and present. And there they are, worshiping this idol, and Moses is devastated. He drops the 10 Commandments, they smash in two. And we read that God's heart was broken. Broken that the people of Israel could be so quick to turn their back on him, to forget all that he had done. And we read in Exodus 33 verse 2 that God says to Moses, I will send an angel before you, and I'll drive out the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. Go up to a land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go with you, because you are a stiff-necked people, and I might destroy you on the way. When the people heard these distressing words, they began to mourn, and no one put on any ornaments. So God is saying, look, I promised you a land flowing with milk and honey, maple syrup and bacon. It's yours. I said I'd provide for you. I'm going to do it. I'm going to send an angel. This angel will lead you through. Anyone who tries to attack you, the angel will protect you. You'll get everything you've longed for. All those years as slaves, dreaming of that moment in that free land, I'm going to give it to you. But you need to know my presence will not go with you. And the people begin to mourn. Why? Because they realize they can have everything that the world could throw at them. Everything that in their minds felt like the best way to live, but without God's presence, they had nothing. Without God's presence, they can have all the milk, all the honey that they ever desired, all the freedom that they ever wanted. But if his presence wasn't with them, it was pointless because they had nothing. I love this book title that says this: Jesus plus nothing equals everything. Jesus plus nothing equals everything. Do we believe that? Do we live like that? You know, as leaders of worshipers, it's the greatest gift that we can know God's presence. Nothing the world could ever throw at us. No amount of success, no amount of money, no amount of followers, no amount of influence will ever come close to knowing God's presence. That's why Psalm 73:28 gets it so right. It says, but as for me, God's presence is all I need. I believe God is wanting to stir up within us today and tonight a sense of, God, your presence is all I need. Yeah, it's nice to have the latest Apple product. It's nice to eat out at a fancy restaurant. It's nice to have a house, clothes, a car, but actually, Lord, your presence is all I need. Arguably the greatest actor of a generation and Canada's greatest export, Jim Carrey, once said this: I hope everybody could get rich and famous and have everything they ever dreamed of, so that they will know it's not the answer. You can have everything you want, but it won't make you happy. The world is living a life trying to find happiness in possessions and things, in positions. But happiness is found in the presence of God. The story moves on. Moses begins to plead with God. God, please don't hide your presence from us. Don't remove your presence from us. You know, as a leader, that's what he's doing. He's just pleading, God, please, we need your presence. And God eventually relents and he says, my presence will go with you and I'll give you rest. And then Moses, in relief, just says, if your presence doesn't go with us, do not send us up from here. How will anyone know that you are pleased with your people unless you go with us? What else will distinguish your people from all other people on the face of the earth? You know, the truth is Christians aren't better people than non-Christians. We don't behave better. We don't make better choices. The only thing that will distinguish us from anyone else on the face of the earth is God's presence. Is God's presence. You know, God isn't looking for more equipped, more impressive communicators, more kind of courageous, confident leaders. He's looking for a people who will say, God, we need your presence. Only your presence will do. Unless your presence goes with us, do not send us up away from here. And Moses was a man who understood the secret of success. He understood the key to success. And he was a man who tasted success. Let's not forget, he stood up to the most powerful man in the world, Pharaoh. And he stood up to him and he said, let my people go. Pharaoh said, no. And so God began to perform miracles. And Moses stood up again, let my people go. No. I think it's like 7 or 8 times. He keeps going back and he says, let my people go. so that we may worship God. And eventually, Pharaoh lets Moses lead the people of Israel out. But then the chase kicks in. You've probably all seen it in the movie, Prince of Egypt. And they're faced with the Red Sea. What's going to happen? And God splits open the Red Sea. They pass through. Moses has led the people through the desert where we're hearing about manna and quail and water. Everything that they needed, God had provided. God had revealed himself to Moses. He was a leader of a nation, yet none of that mattered for him. For Moses, do you know what success looked like? It looked like this: walking with God and knowing his presence. So simple. For him, at the end of the day, it was all about walking with God and knowing his presence. That he didn't want any fame, any kind of adulation. The key for him was knowing God, unless your presence goes with us. You know, I wonder for you, for us today as leaders of worship, working within churches, volunteering, serving, what does success look like? Have you ever thought about it? What is it that we're kind of driving towards? Is success for a worship leader once you've recorded your own album? You know, is success when you get to lead worship for a church of over 1,000 people? Is it when you get asked to lead at a national conference or get to travel around the globe? Then suddenly you're a success. Then you've made it. Is success when you have your own office full of leather-bound books, a smell of rich mahogany wood? Is that when you've made it? Is success when you have more Instagram followers than Justin Bieber? What is it you're living for? Moses was a man who just wanted to walk with God and know his presence. The people of Israel were so quick to create an idol. And I wonder if sometimes in our churches, we've taken the world's idol of success. You know, we idolize success. We look at these heroes and think, wow, how can I be more like this person and that person? And we created these idols in our churches. And we look at how the world lives, how the world functions and operates, and sometimes it's infiltrated the church. And it feels to me that sometimes we're pursuing excellence over taking risks. The world values excellence. We're kind of seeing how amazing gigs kind of are run. And we think, let's try and mimic that. Let's be like Coldplay, and then we'll be successful. It feels like sometimes iTunes is shaping our worship more than Jesus is. We're more influenced than YouTube than we are by the scriptures. It feels like the spirit of the age is shaping us more than the spirit of the living God. Who are we living for? How are we being formed and shaped in our worship? Someone once said to me, and it just completely was like an arrow to my heart. He said, I look around at a lot of worship and it feels sometimes like there's an over-fascination with production and an under-fascination with the presence of God. You know, I love all the creativity that we have at our disposal, visuals and lighting and sounds, and it's amazing to grow in it and pursue it and step out in fresh ways of being creative. But that is not the end goal. That is not going to change anyone. However great a song is, however great a movie is, it's not going to change anyone. The only thing that will ever change someone eternally is the presence of God. I think sometimes we're in danger of trying to build these impressive services and sounds and expressions of worship, but actually they're missing the key ingredient, God's presence. I want to show you a picture. It's a picture of a bridge. And this bridge was built at great expense. Huge amount of engineering went into it to design this amazing bridge that would enable people to move from one side of land across the river to the other side safely. But sadly, after all these millions of dollars investment, the river has moved. And actually what you're left with is a redundant, pointless, man-made bridge. It's good for nothing. In fact, it looks a little bit stupid. You know, the river of God, the Spirit of God is moving through the church. The wind of the Holy Spirit is blowing as it chooses. The pillar of cloud by day, the fire by night is moving. And sometimes if we're getting so set and caught up in a way of doing things, we become a bit like that bridge. We've got this amazing man-made expression that's ultimately redundant because the Spirit of God has moved on. If our aim, if our goal is to build something impressive, to try and be successful in the eyes of the world, we'll always miss what God does. Because Jesus, when he walked upon the earth, he never pursued success. In fact, everything he did looked like failure often. Everything he did looked like foolishness in the eyes of the world. But actually, he had the power of God at his disposal. He embodied and he exhibited the power of God. And for us as followers of Christ, if we want to see lives changed, if we want to see the kingdom of heaven breaking through, it will happen when we are obedient and we say, where are you moving, Spirit of God? What are you doing? Basically, I believe in the church, we need to get a lot more messy. John Wimber, the founder of the Vineyard, once said, it's neat and tidy in the graveyard, it's alive and messy in the nursery. You know, when we see expressions of worship in the scriptures, so often there's a massive amount of mess that goes on. Thinking about the dedication of the temple in Solomon. You know, for years this dream that King David had and then his son got to fulfill. Huge expense building this amazing temple that would house the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God. You know, unbelievable resources, finances, workmanship, craftsmanship going into design this elaborate cathedral, this elaborate temple. And then they come to the dedication and they pull together the best musicians throughout Israel. Priests, trumpet players, singers, and they've rehearsed and they know exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be the most glorious, phenomenal sound Israel has ever heard. And there they are, they're singing, "Give thanks to the Lord, his love endures forever." And then God's glory shows up. A cloud fills the temple, and the next thing you see is all of the priests face down. No one knows what to do next. You can imagine someone with a clipboard and the earpiece like running around. No, quick, stand up. You've got to sing the next song. What? You know, this isn't on the running sheet. This isn't on the agenda. You know, we've got to be finished in 3 minutes. Oh, and then we're going to the video, and it's like, I think the people of Israel, they might have remembered a little bit about the amazing music at the start, the kind of, wow, seeing this temple. But more than anything, they'd have remembered God's presence showing up and people being so overwhelmed, so undone, they just didn't know what to do next. I'd love to see more of that in our churches. You know, I've seen a lot of clouds created by smoke machines, but I'd love to see God do it and like people just being so in awe of God. Mary, when she comes before Jesus is reclining, having dinner, and Mary brings this alabaster jar of perfume. She just breaks it open, this perfume worth a year's wages. She drops it on Jesus' feet, and she wipes his feet with her hair and her tears. You know, for a woman in the first century Israel to undo her hair in front of a man was just absolutely disgusting. A husband could divorce his wife right there for acting so inappropriately. It was such an intimate thing that a woman would never, ever let her hair down in public. And yet Mary is here letting her hair down, wiping Jesus' feet, crying, and people are appalled. Socially, they're like, this is outrageous. But Jesus just says, wow, thank you. And he honors her. An expression of worship that was so costly but so messy. We are broken, messy people. We try pretty hard to cover it up, but we all carry with us vulnerabilities, weaknesses, limitations. And when we encounter a God who loves us, who is for us, and who is almighty and all-powerful, the response will always be broken and messy. You know, that song we were singing, heart-broke lives, heart-shattered lives. You know, when heart-shattered people encounter a good God, It's never going to be like, oh, that's nice, neat and tidy in a box. It's going to be raw and messy and heartfelt and honest and passionate. One of the most courageous acts of worship I've seen in the last few months was I was leading a service, and it's predominantly young people. Young people often in worship, they're all, they've got to be cool because they're trying to think about who they could sort of pick up later. They don't want to look too keen, and, it's all about who else is around. And I was leading worship, and I felt God say, just step back and give some space. We stepped back, and then I felt God say, there's someone here with a song. And they get them up to sing on the microphone. And this is in our church, so it's kind of people who we know a bit. But I said, if you're here, you're part of this congregation, and God's put a song on your heart, why don't you come up and sing it? And then I stood back, and you think, oh, that was a bad move, That was obviously the cheese I ate for lunch. This is going to be awful. And we waited awkwardly, and then this guy begins coming up, and he's probably about 19 years old, and he's got a perm. Now, there's nothing wrong for a guy having a perm, but you don't see too many 19-year-olds with a perm. And he's got this heavy metal T-shirt and chains dropping from everywhere. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be very interesting. And I'm thinking, please, please, please let it be good. It wasn't good. It was horrific. He gets up and he starts singing, and it's tuneless, and the words don't fully make sense. And I'm like, this is a train wreck. How are we going to pick this one up? But you know what? I begin to watch all these other young people. And suddenly, some of their indifference begins to melt away. And what they see, they don't see someone who can't sing, can't write lyrics. They see someone who is so passionate about Jesus. They see a courage. They see a freedom. They see just a raw expression of worship that they think, I want that. I don't want to be so contained, so held back by fear, by what other people think of me, by the culture I'm in. I want to be abandoned in my worship. And the worship in the room just began to lift. People began to throw themselves into the worship. It was such an example of passionate, wholehearted worship. We need to create space in our services for God to move. Some of us were copying what the world does. Better musician, better production, slicker set lists. That's what we need. But I believe God is saying, the river is flowing, the wind is blowing. Follow me, walk with me, know my presence. Success is when my presence is with you. Do not send us out from here unless your presence goes with us. How many of us, when we're leading worship, are pounding our fists on the floor before we get on stage saying, God, unless you're with us, this is just going to be music. This is just going to be songs. This is just going to be sound. But if your presence comes, anything could happen. Lives could be changed. People could be healed. Broken hearts could be restored. The lame could walk. The blind could see. And God could use you, and God could use me as his presence goes with us. A.W. Tozer says this, the church that can't worship must be entertained. And men and women who can't lead a church to worship must provide the entertainment. Church is not an entertainment business. I end with this. In the 13th century, there was a little monk called Francis. And he was beginning to gather quite a crowd, proclaiming the gospel, ministering to the poor. And he lived in this area called Assisi. It was Francis of Assisi. And there was a very wealthy nobleman called Bernard of Quinterville. And he was fascinated by this man, intrigued at the following he was gathering and the way he was living such a radical life. So he invited him to his house, and they had dinner together, and he quizzed him, and he asked him about his faith and his journey. And it was getting late, and so he said, why don't you stay the night? And Bernard Quinterville was just watching everything. And he was fascinated that through the night, all he could hear coming out of Francis of Assisi's bedroom was this man lying on his bed, weeping and groaning, pounding his fists, and just saying this prayer over and over again. My God and my all. my God and my all. My God and my all. And the fervency, the passion, the integrity of that prayer just cut Bernard to the quick. And when he woke up, he said to Francis of Assisi, I'm in. I'm following. And he gave everything up and he joined Francis of Assisi in carrying the gospel all over Europe and ministering to the poorest of the poor. We're so aware of the days we're living in, where there are a group of people who are laying down their lives to serve a cause that basically leads to death and destruction. ISIS is a cause that brings nothing good, nothing of value, yet people are dying for it. And so many of us in the church are existing in comfort. Yeah, we kind of love Jesus, but we kind of love a comfortable life. The only way we're going to see nations transformed is by that kind of passion, like Francis of Assisi, like Moses, who will pound our fist on the ground and say, my God and my all, unless your presence goes with us. I believe God is wanting to anoint us. And God is wanting to send all of us out from here tonight, different, changed, anointed by the Holy Spirit, that we might live lives that see God's kingdom come here in Vancouver and beyond. So why don't we stand up and we're going to pray and we're going to ask that the Spirit of God, the river, would begin flowing through this place, sending us out. For some, I believe there may be even a bit of a confession that you need to stand before God and say, Lord, I'm sorry. I've been pursuing the wrong things. I've been pursuing my own career. I've valued and I've idolized success. You know, if I'm honest, sometimes people come up to me and say, you know, how can I do what you do? How can we be like Jad? How can we lead at bigger conferences? And it's the wrong question. Never, ever pursue the stage. Never, ever pursue the stage. I don't believe God ever calls anyone to pursue the stage. He only ever calls people to pursue him. And if you pursue him, he'll lead you wherever he calls you to go. And he'll equip you and empower you.